December 19th, 1944. Verdun, France. The Supreme Headquarters war room smelled of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. Around a long wooden table sat generals with maps spread before them, red pins marking positions that no longer existed. Not a single person was smiling. 3 days earlier, a German offensive had exploded out of the Ardennes forest. Entire American divisions had been shattered. Reports of surrounded units, captured battalions, and tanks rolling through broken lines piled up faster than anyone could read them. At the head of the table sat General Eisenhower. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. He looked at his assembled commanders and asked one question. The question everyone had been dreading. How soon can you attack north to relieve Bastogne? Silence. Minds raced through impossible calculations. Moving an entire army 90 degrees. Disengaging from current positions. Marching through snow and ice. Coordinating hundreds of thousands of men. At least a week. Maybe 10 days. No one wanted to be the first to answer. Then one voice cut through the tension. I can be there in 48 hours with 3 divisions. Heads snapped toward George S. Patton. Some officers stared in disbelief. Others thought he was grandstanding. Moving that many men that fast wasn't just difficult. It was considered impossible. But Patton's face was calm, matter-of-fact. He wasn't bluffing. He was the only one who saw this coming. To understand why, you have to go back to December 8th, 11 days before that desperate meeting. Colonel Oskar Koch was Patton's intelligence officer. While other Allied intelligence officers tracked the German retreat and predicted the war would be over by Christmas, Koch noticed something disturbing. He spent hours studying enemy movement reports, prisoner interrogations, radio intercepts. A pattern emerged. German divisions were pulling out of the line, not retreating, repositioning. Fuel trucks were moving forward, ammunition dumps being established, fighter aircraft concentrating. Koch compiled everything into a detailed report. The Germans were preparing something big, an offensive, and the evidence pointed to one target, the Ardennes, the same forest they'd attacked through in 1940, the weakest part of the Allied line. Koch took his report to Patton. Most commanders would have dismissed it. Higher headquarters had already declared the Germans were beaten, too weak to attack. Allied intelligence had concluded the enemy was finished. But Patton read every word. He studied the maps. He saw what Koch saw. A perfect setup for disaster. On December 9th, Patton gave one order. Start planning. His staff thought he was being paranoid. The Germans didn't have the strength for a major offensive. Everyone knew that. But they obeyed. Plans were drawn in secret. Staff officers identified 3 routes north from Patton's current positions. They calculated distances, march times, fuel requirements. They earmarked specific divisions for the movement. They positioned supplies along potential attack routes. Maps were prepared. Orders were drafted and sealed. All the work is done quietly, carefully. Other Allied commanders were planning Christmas parties and counting down to the holiday. By December 16th, Patton's Third Army was uniquely prepared for a disaster no one else believed was coming. Quick thing before we continue. Hit subscribe if you want more incredible WWII stories like this. We're building something special here, and you'll want to be part of it. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16th, that explosion came. German artillery opened fire along an 80-mile front. The barrage sounded like continuous thunder. Then came the tanks. 25 German divisions smashed into 6 surprised American divisions. Entire battalions were surrounded in the first hours. Communications broke down. Units lost contact with headquarters. Reports flooded into Allied command centers. Confused. Contradictory. Describing massive attacks everywhere at once. The higher command didn't believe them at first. They thought it was just a local counterattack. Some spoiling attacks to disrupt Allied plans. Even after 6 hours, most generals assumed it would be contained quickly. But the reports kept getting worse. The 106th Division shattered. 2 entire regiments surrounded. The 28th Division broke apart. German tanks rolling west through snow-covered hills. By evening, over 20,000 American soldiers were cut off, captured, or dead. Koch walked into Patton's headquarters that afternoon. His face was grim. Patton looked up from his desk. Well, Koch laid out the latest reports. Everything was happening exactly where he'd predicted. The direction, the scale, the objective. All of it matched his analysis from 8 days earlier. Patton didn't sound surprised. "You were right," he said quietly. Then he stood up. "Get me Bradley." While other headquarters were still trying to understand what was happening, Patton was already moving. He called his staff together. "We're executing the contingency plans." The plans they'd spent the past week preparing. The ones everyone thought were unnecessary. Division commanders received sealed orders. Orders written days before the attack. Routes they would march. Positions they would occupy. The emergency that everyone else had just discovered was one he'd already prepared for. 3 days later came the meeting at Verdun. Eisenhower's question hung in the air. How soon could someone attack north? Every general in that room knew the math. Pulling 3 divisions out of line. Rotating them 90 degrees. Moving them 100 miles. In winter. Through snow and ice. With limited roads. While under pressure from the enemy. A week minimum. More likely 10 days. Patton's answer shocked them. 48 hours. Eisenhower studied him carefully. This was no time for theatrics. "Don't be fatuous, George," he said sharply. Patton didn't flinch. "I've already issued the orders." The room absorbed this in stunned silence. The massive German offensive that had caught everyone by surprise. Patton had been expecting it. He'd spent 11 days preparing for it. His divisions were already alerted. His staff is already coordinating. His supplies are already positioned. One phone call would set everything in motion. Eisenhower looked at him hard, searching for any sign of doubt. He saw none. "All right," Eisenhower said finally. "Get moving." Patton walked outside. The snow was falling. He picked up a field telephone and spoke 2 words. "Play ball." Those words triggered everything. Orders flashed through communication channels. The 4th Armored Division began moving north within hours. The 26th Infantry Division followed. Then the 80th. In total, 133,000 men. 20,000 vehicles. Columns stretched for miles. They moved day and night without stopping. Temperatures dropped below freezing. Ice made roads treacherous. Trucks skidded into ditches. Men wrapped themselves in blankets and kept marching. Fingers went numb. Feet went raw. But they didn't stop. While other Allied commands were still trying to organize, Patton's army was already on the move. Guided by maps prepared before the crisis began. Following routes identified during those 11 days of preparation. By December 22nd, lead elements reached the battle zone. They'd covered over 100 miles in brutal conditions. What seemed like a miracle was a really detailed execution. The fighting was fierce. Villages became battlegrounds. American tanks clashed with German Panthers in frozen fields. Infantry pushed through woods where every tree could hide an enemy soldier. They took ground, got thrown back, regrouped and attacked again. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne and attached units were surrounded. Supplies dwindling. Ammunition rationed. When the Germans demanded surrender, the American commander sent back one word. Nuts. But supplies were running out. The defenders believed relief was coming. They had to hold on. On December 26th at 4:50 p.m., tanks from the 4th Armored Division broke through the German lines. Physical contact was made with the defenders. The siege was broken. Exactly on the timeline Patton had promised. The Battle of the Bulge became the bloodiest battle American forces fought in Europe. 19,000 killed. 4,000 to 7,000 wounded. 23,000 captured or missing. But it could have been far worse. If Bastogne had fallen, the Germans would have reached the Meuse River. They might have recaptured Antwerp. The entire Allied front could have collapsed. The war might have dragged on for months. Patton's rapid response disrupted everything. But here's what haunts this story. How did the entire Allied command miss this coming? Why were all the warnings ignored? The uncomfortable answer is simple. Someone had noticed. Oskar Koch had tracked every piece of evidence. He'd predicted not just the attack but where it would hit. His reports went upward through intelligence channels. And everyone dismissed them. The war was almost over. Everyone knew that. The Germans were beaten, too weak for major operations. Every piece of data was bent to fit what people already believed. But intelligence reached multiple headquarters. Koch wasn't the only one who saw the pattern. Others noticed it too. Most commanders treated it as unlikely. Background noise. One commander took it seriously enough to act. George Patton didn't just listen to the warning. He bet his entire army on it. He used precious time preparing for a crisis that might never come. While others relaxed and celebrated early victories, he was planning for disaster. And when the disaster came, that preparation meant he could do what no other force could. Move an entire army in 48 hours. Attack immediately. Break a siege everyone thought was doomed. Official histories praise Patton's achievement at Bastogne. But the 11 days of preparation rarely get mentioned. Koch's name appears in footnotes. His accurate prediction gets overshadowed by the narrative of surprise. The real lesson isn't about one general's brilliance. It's about what makes the difference in crisis. Intelligence has value only when leaders act on it. Preparation isn't glamorous, doesn't win medals. But in crisis, it separates chaos from execution. Most commanders at that December meeting heard the same intelligence reports. They concluded the enemy couldn't do what the evidence suggested. One commander looked at the same information and prepared for everyone else being wrong. He was ready not because he was lucky or reckless. He was ready because he believed in planning for the worst. Because he trusted someone who saw what others refused to see. The rapid movement that saved Bastogne gets credited to courage and firepower. Those mattered absolutely. But none of it was possible without the quiet work done before the first shot was fired. That is why Patton was the only general ready for the Battle of the Bulge. That is why preparation matters more than brilliance. The battle was won in those 11 days before anyone knew there would be a battle.